What's up, everybody? You are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. I'm Dr. Zach Baker, and with me today we have Dr. Corrie Jones, who is going to talk a little bit about evidence-based practice, a term that if you are a clinician or you are a student, you have probably heard and talked about more than you would like to, but it's an important term. It is one that I think is often misunderstood and not always utilized in the best context. I think everybody is well-intentioned when it comes to patient care and providing the ideal patient experience, but I think sometimes we don't always have the best understanding of how to allocate kind of our resources. What are we doing for an individual? How are we justifying it for that individual? And if something is working or potentially not working, where could that disconnect be? Is it a PT issue? Is it an intervention issue? Is it a patient issue? How do we tease all of that out? So I think before we really get too far into it, Corrie, talk to us, what does evidence-based practice actually mean and what goes into it?
Yeah, so there's a definition out there about evidence-based practice that talks about it in three components. So the first component is patient experience. So everything about patient context, where they're coming from, and making sure we know who they are as a person. The second one is the therapist experience. So again, anything that the therapist brings to the table as far as their knowledge, understanding, but also their experiences with treating patients. And then the third one is the research. So a lot of times I feel like there's so much emphasis on the research or on one thing or the other. But this definition is cool because it's making sure that we understand that the best medicine has all three of those components. The patient knowing who they are, the therapist knowing who they are, and the research and showing everything that it has in the past there. So kind of just making sure we have all three of those parts. So that very first one is the patient experience. So it really does matter where people are coming from. Everybody comes with a different narrative in mind. Everybody comes with their own experiences with either illness or injury or doctor's experiences, PT experiences. Everybody comes with a different level of support in their life or a different goal or a different identity. So I think it's a really cool part of what we do that every single person that sits in front of us is different, and they're going to respond to the medicine and to the prescriptions that we give differently. But it's one of those things that has to be considered because you can have 3 different ACLs and they're all going to respond to your exercises and what you give them differently. And that's totally fine. But if we have some of that emotional and social IQ, and we can analyze, what they might need in the moment, man, we can really modify what we're doing, individualize what we're doing so that we really do get the best possible treatment for our patients. And not only are they going to get better and reach their goals, but maybe they'll have a little bit more fun when they're doing it too. So the patient experience is huge. I don't know. What would you say about that, Zach? Where have you seen that in your practice?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. And I think that where I often go with the patient experience is not only in real time, how they're reacting to certain things, but I always think about the patients that they've had multiple rounds of PT intervention before, or maybe they've had recurrent injuries. And you're trying to figure out, why does this individual continue to struggle or continue to succeed? And you're almost looking for patterns that, unless you go back and historically ask, I don't want to say the right questions, but enough questions to get a good idea of what have they tried, what have they not tried, was there any hesitancy, was there any kind of over-exuberance on their end as to why something did or didn't work. You start to get an idea that oftentimes things may have been or may not have been prescribed in the past, but the way it was communicated, the way it was executed, the way that it was carried out, didn't yield the outcomes that you were hoping for. And if you simply just took it at face value, oh, we did PT, it didn't work, or I did this and it did work, but you didn't ask any follow-up questions to that, it may lead to a little bit of a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding of some of those previous historical events, previous interventions, or what is the patient's perceived outcomes? Why are they saying something worked? Why are they saying something didn't work? Was there any validation to that? Now, we'd mentioned patient experience is just one of the three different areas that make up evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine. The patient is one side of that, but the person working with the patient is the other side of that equation. How would you define the therapist interactions or the therapist experiences in evidence-based practice?
Yeah, so definitely a big influencer once again on what's going to happen within that therapeutic process. So, part of it is just personality, right? Like, are you going to get along with the person that you're working with? That's actually like a huge part of it. Like, can you actually communicate well and get along to the point where, hey, you team up to really get after this thing and reach goals together? Because that really is like the big thing is we're teaming up with somebody, not necessarily like trying to fix them or tell them what to do, but more so like guide them and help them along this path that they're already on. So I think that's huge. Like, who are you as a therapist and can you connect with people well? And then maybe part two of that is just literally your clinical experience. So depending on how long you've been in the game, maybe sometimes you have to really take what you like bad habits or things that you've learned in the past, and you have to realize that the medicine has moved on from that. And so you're going to learn from those experiences and then apply them differently as you move forward. So some of it can be ditching old habits, but some of it too can just be like, hey, I've seen so many patients at this point. I mean, I've been practicing for 14 years and I've seen, hey, these particular treatments, these particular prescriptions or like strategies for training have really helped people in this circumstance. I can use that experience to really better my patients' chances of getting to their goals. So it's again, like, yes, we have the research and we have what the patient is saying, but really, we also have to lean to some degree on our understanding and our experiences because we have been able to like kind of look around and find out what works. We've tried so many different things with so many different patients. And kind of what you said before, there's patterns there as well. There's things that have worked for people. And as a result of those things that have worked for people, hey, our brains kind of take note of it. And then we can use that in the future. It's not always going to be in a research article because ain't nobody got time for that, right? Like there's just not enough time to do all of the research all of the time. Some of it's still catching up. And yet there's plenty of us that have been around for a little bit. We can say, hey, here's what works for this thing. And we're going to try it with you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, depending on the patient, but we can at least like give our 2 cents and use our experience to make some good decisions. So same thing. Have you kind of seen the same thing? Like, hey, yeah, I can really be a good clinician on the day because of my experiences. What would you say about all that?
I think the biggest thing that I've come to the conclusion after 13 years in the clinic is I don't think that my treatment approach, style, or philosophy has drastically changed for any specific injury or patient population that I work with. But I do think I get to conclusions a little bit more efficiently. Whereas when I was earlier in my career, patients would, eventually get good outcomes, but there'd be more volatile swings, either overestimating or underestimating what we should or shouldn't be doing, how much something does or doesn't influence something. So I think the biggest influence that I've seen from therapist experience that I draw is now when I get somebody with a certain clinical presentation, after seeing this presentation for this patient demographic 100, 200, 300 times, you have a pretty good idea of what's not going to work. And right. I think it's not necessarily I've got the secret sauce of, if I do X, Y, and Z, we're going to be better by tomorrow. But I've had enough kind of failures or trials and errors in the past where I know I don't need to spend time going over this on day one. Or I know I don't need to spend time investigating this any further because more often than not, a week from now, a session from now, we're still going to be in the same trajectory. So I think it's just kind of narrowed that starting point or the options that I'm going for. Now, the last part of this kind of triple Venn diagram of evidence-based practice becomes research. And research tends to be where we get a lot of emphasis on what evidence-based practice is, which rightfully so. We need some sort of systematic and structured way to come to conclusions, or actually probably not come to conclusions, but have frames of reference and starting points for thought processes with different individuals. But there are some limitations or shortcomings or misinterpretations of this part of evidence-based practice as well, how would you guide clinicians and students in utilizing research to supplement a plan of care?
Yeah, so the big thing here is making sure that we keep research within the context of the study done. So I think so many times we can read research articles and start generalizing. And honestly, this has been kind of one of the pitfalls in the past for physical therapy. One article comes out about one thing with an N of 5, and we start applying it to everyone, right? Little by little, obviously, medicine has got better of making sure that our sample sizes are bigger and making sure that it's a little bit more applicable to many people. And even like at the end of articles, usually it says, hey, here's our conclusions, and yet here's what we'd like to study further because this article can't cover everything. So I think that's one of the biggest things is that whatever articles you're reading, even if it's kind of like a summary of multiple articles, it still is not everybody's context. We just said every therapist is different and every patient is different. In that regard, we have to use research, like you said, as a starting point. So it's here's what we've seen, here's what we've been able to conclude because of this. And then as a result, put that in the mix of the understanding you already have and the person that's in front of you. So part 2 of that is making sure that we're able to read articles well. We do have to be able to critically analyze what somebody else has put out there. So like making sure that we understand the different components of research so that we can make conclusions and say, hey, this is appropriate for this patient or that patient. So I do think it's important. Some of them are easier. You know, we have our CPGs and stuff that guide a little bit more of our basic level care. But overall, we still have to kind of use that like narrow eye in order to determine which articles are applicable at the time. I think sometimes we give like all of our emphasis to one thing or to one article where we can really be widely read and make sure that we're reading all of the different things on a particular case so that, again, it's kind of like when we do return to sport testing, we're not going to do one test. We're going to do a battery of tests so that we get a better view or a better comprehension of where our patient's at. I think the same thing with the research. If we're reading one here and there, we can start using it out of context instead of being widely read, making sure we're in the research and in the journals and making sure that we're kind of making conclusions based on all of this information and how it's interrelated. I think we get a little bit lucky at R2P because we have DPT students. So a lot of them are filling us in on here's what we read in school, or here's what we're seeing in the residency readings, or here's what we're doing. So we are able to kind of take from them and take from their in-services and learn from them, which is huge. But then if you're not dealing with students a whole lot, there is like an actual energy that you have to put forward as a physical therapist to take the time, even though we're working 40 hours a week, we have to find ways to take the time to keep leveling up. Some of that might be just the bibliographies at the end of CEUs or presentations that we've heard, but sometimes it's literally just taking the time to really do the research and like take time to read. So I don't know, how have you fit that into your life, Zach? Like, do you feel like you've been able to kind of try to pick up on that, but then apply it well? What do you think?
So I think I kind of have a cheat code when it comes to research within the residency because I have several residents every year who are doing monthly research article reviews, and then we're discussing it within the residency curriculum. So I don't spend as much time individually going out and looking for research as I did when I was earlier on in my career. But I'd say I'm actually probably consuming more now than I was earlier in my career just because it's built into the roles and responsibilities that I have within the company. And I think typically when I do get a article that comes across my plate, I try to almost challenge myself to incorporate it at the next available time that I have with a patient that fits whatever that the injury or topic was, just to see what kind of credence there is, and I don't want to say credibility, but applicability to the new research that's out there, and if it actually changes the way that I approach anything. So, Corrie, as always, appreciate the time, thoughts, and energy on this. If you have any thoughts on evidence-based practice, let us know. Leave a comment, share your thoughts. Would love to hear what you have to say. You are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, and subscribe, and have a great day.